Good evening, you're watching London Live News at 6 with Helena Warrior. Coming up tonight, the Transport Secretary tells rail worker staff not to risk striking yourself out of a job, as industrial action that will close much of the railway is set to go ahead next week. The Mayor of London is out in the capital marking Clean Air Day and will be speaking to lung health experts aiming to raise awareness of the impact of air pollution. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. Plus, Ruth Ozeki wins this year's Women's Prize for Fiction. We'll be speaking to her about her top novel and what it means to win the 30 grand prize. And we speak to jazz pianist Frederick Gasita, who is bringing rhythms from across the world to the Barbican this Sunday, accompanied by his vibrant Bantu Jazz Orchestra. First tonight, though, the Transport Secretary has appealed directly to rail workers to avoid striking. During a speech at a train depot in North London, Grant Shapps said next week's rail strikes are designed to inflict damage at the worst possible time. Half of Britain's rail lines will be closed during strikes on 3 days next week by the RMT union, with disputes flaring over pay, jobs and conditions.
We have a rare opportunity here to fix the issues that have long since plagued our railways. But with strikes, all we're going to do is lose even more passengers, lose even more revenue, make further investment in railway uneconomical, and potentially lose thousands of railway jobs as well. Not only is there no justification for this action, it's going to cause misery. Misery to people looking forward to their first Glastonbury for 3 years. Misery to workers who can't get to their jobs. Misery to students who won't be able to get to their GCSEs and to their A-levels 17 public exams over this next week's strike period. And misery to people waiting for hospital treatment who may now miss their operation. And there's another group of people that I'm worried about. Railway workers and their families. This will be a damaging strike. It's not like the old days when the RMT could shut down the nation's economy. Now many rail users can work from home. For millions of passengers, rail is now a choice, not a necessity.
Well, that was Transport Secretary Grant Shapps there, and in a previous statement, the RMT union said that due to the cost of living crisis, it is unacceptable for railway workers to either lose their jobs or face another year of a pay freeze when inflation is rising. Now, Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey appeared today at Westminster Magistrates Court as he faced 4 counts of sexual assault and a further count of causing a person to engage in sexual activity without consent, relating to 3 men. The former Hollywood star is free to fly home back to the US after a court heard he strenuously denies allegations that he sexually assaulted the 3 men between 2005 and 2013 in London and Gloucestershire. Well, Spacey was not asked to enter pleas and was granted unconditional bail ahead of his next appearance at Southwark Crown Court in July. Detectives have released an e-fit image of a suspect they wish to identify following a series of linked sexual assaults in East London. Detectives have so far received 22 reports of lone women out walking or jogging in the Hackney Marshes area being approached by a male on a bicycle who has grabbed or touched private areas of their bodies and made inappropriate comments before riding off. The suspect is described as a light-skinned male, possibly mixed race, aged 16 to 17, who is usually wearing a grey tracksuit. Well, police suspect there could be further incidents and urge others who may not yet have spoken to them to come forward. Interest rates have risen to the highest level in 13 years as the Bank of England attempts to stem soaring prices. In a 5th consecutive rise, rates have increased from 1% to 1.25%. The bank's experts also warned that prices for households across the country might increase even further than previously thought. As the cost of living crisis continues, inflation is currently at a 40-year high of 9%, and the bank warned it could surpass 11% later this year. Now, today is Clean Air Day, aiming to raise awareness of the impact of air pollution and the effect it has on public health. With car emissions being a known and well-documented cause of air pollution, one London-based study commissioned by Asthma UK at Queen Mary's in London has been looking into the problem of air pollution generated by electric vehicles. Well, Hebe spoke to Dr. James Scales about the study he's been working on, and also to Sam Walker, who is the Director of Research and Innovation for the charity Asthma and Lung UK, about what they're calling for on Clean Air Day 2022.
Air pollution contributes to about 1 in 8 deaths globally. Within that, we know it disproportionately impacts people from vulnerable groups, such as those who have chronic disease, such as asthma, those from minority ethnic groups, and those from low socioeconomic areas. In an effort to combat air pollution, governments are moving towards what we call the Euro 7 emission standards, which encourages the use of electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles. Because these vehicles are heavier than their fossil fuel counterparts, because of the amount of batteries they have inside them and the electric motors, they produce more particulate matter type air pollution. So while they produce less CO2 out the exhaust, the actual pollution that comes from the brake wear, tyre wear and road wear is increased. It stays within 20 metres of most roads, so it is inhaled all the time when you're walking down a road. London is incredibly congested. There's also a lot of air pollution programmes being implemented already. Londoners are used to the ultra-low emission zone, which has just been expanded to the North-South Circular. They're already used to having to increase the electrification of their fleet. The positive aspect of particulate matter pollution is that it can be combated. We can make the cars lighter by improving battery technology or placing less batteries in the car. We can change the material in the brakes, roads and tyres. And this is an easier change industry policy or criteria than it is to change the behaviours of an entire city. So overall, it's a positive story that there are easy, actionable ways. We've just got to show these links first.
So as Asthma and Lung UK, essentially we hear a lot from people who are really suffering from exposure to dirty air, and we realise this is affecting hundreds of thousands of people, and done a survey recently where millions of people potentially estimated to be sort of trapped in their home on days of high pollution. So essentially what we'd like the government to do is to commit to new, bolder, clean air targets, and to do this by 2030, which is 10 years quicker than they're committing to at the moment. And we really think that that's exactly what they should be doing.
Well, also marking Clean Air Day at Great Ormond Street Hospital, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, warned that government plans to reduce harmful air pollution do not go far enough. The Mayor said it was hugely disappointing that proposed new targets on PM2.5 particulates, which typically result from tyres, brakes and road debris, would not become legally enforceable until 2040 and be twice as high as the World Health Organization's current recommended maximum levels. Well, a spokesman from the Department for the Environment defended the targets, saying they are ambitious, world-leading and based on the latest science. The Duchess of Cambridge has hosted a roundtable event on the importance of early childhood development, as research reveals that 70% of people think it should be prioritised more. The findings by the Royal Foundation Centre for Early Childhood show that 9 in 10 agree that early years are important in shaping children's lives, but less than a fifth recognise the unique importance of children's development from birth to the age of 5. Kate also met Health Secretary Sajid Javid and Families Minister Will Quince. Well, let's just take a quick look at sport in the capital. And whilst the football season has just finished, eyes are already on the next season. With no top-flight fixtures from the 13th of November to Boxing Day due to the World Cup in Qatar, the season will start earlier than usual on Friday, the 5th of August. It'll be a London derby to kick us off, with Crystal Palace hosting Arsenal in the first game and Liverpool travelling to newly promoted Fulham. Well, other standout ties include West Ham at home to Manchester City, Tottenham at home to Southampton and Chelsea away to former Blues manager Frank Lampard's Everton. Time for a look at London's weather now, and tonight we're still in the mid-20s, just dropping into the teens overnight before what's set to be a very hot start to the weekend. Tomorrow it's expected to hit 30 degrees and maybe even beyond that, so don't forget your Fact 50 if you're out and about. On Saturday it's a little cooler at 27 degrees, mostly cloudy, and Sunday there is a chance of a much needed shower with the temperature sitting at around 20 degrees. Time for a quick break now, but when we come back, we'll be speaking to the author, activist and celebrity MasterChef winner Riyadh Khalif about how pets can help the LGBT+ community with their mental health. See you soon.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. Now let's turn our attention to the local papers. We have London Live's paper reviewer here, Matt Withers, to run us through some of the stories catching the eye this week. Let's start with this. A London cabinet member aiming to become an MP rather far from London.
Yes, and rather quickly. This is from the pages of the Newham Recorder, newly elected Newham councillor aiming to become York MP. And it's true, it's a deputy cabinet member on Newham Council. And he's launched a bid to become an MP for a constituency quite a long way from the boroughs. Luke Charters, he was actually only elected to Newham Council to represent Wall End last month. And now he's standing to be Labour's candidate for York Outer, which is about 200 miles away from Newham. One reader anonymously here said that they're appalled and flabbergasted by the move, saying, what concern does this show for his constituents? Councillor Charters says that he campaigns for Labour in his spare time, and that would happen regardless of whether or not I'm a candidate. But he's not just a councillor. He is deputy cabinet member for inclusive economy, housing delivery, climate emergency and council performance and transformation. Quite a mouthful of a job title, and one that would suggest that he's probably got enough on his plate at the moment.
Quite a lot on his plate, definitely. You know, does he have a connection to York at all? Is there a reason maybe he wants to go there?
Yes, he said that he's running there because he lived in York for 20 years and went to school in the city. He's actually been a candidate before. In 2017, he was Labour's candidate for York Outer, but was beaten by the Conservatives. But, you know, people might think that it's absolutely fair enough that he might wish to be the MP for a city that he's obviously got such a strong connection with, but just a month after taking on quite a sizable portfolio on the council might seem a tad quick.
Absolutely right. Well, we'll keep an eye on his successes, or not, as it might seem. Right, let's move on to this from the Ham and High, an article titled "Glass All Over the Streets of West Hampstead."
Yes, this is a resident of the area who's complained that recycling trucks have been spitting out shards of glass onto the roads of West Hampstead and Hampstead. This is Melanie Viner-Cuneo. She said that these has been happening to trucks that belong to Veolia, which is the contractor that works for Camden Council. And basically, they've been filling these trucks up with recycling, including glass, and they've been getting smashed up in the trucks and just spewing out of the back onto the roads like a lawnmower, basically. And as she said, you know, they're literally all over the streets of West Hampstead and Hampstead. And she said anyone who uses the road should have a problem with it. It's massively hazardous. Obviously, it could cause punctures to cyclists, plus people could fall over, or, you know, dogs could get the glass shards stuck in their paws, so quite serious.
So what has the recycling truck company said then about this? Was it to do with their trucks?
Yes, or at least one truck. She contacted them a few times and they didn't get back to her. As soon as the Ham and High got involved, they issued a statement. They say, our current fleet of collection vehicles is serviced every 6 weeks. It's therefore very rare for spillages to occur. We've identified the vehicle with a fault and have taken it off the road to be repaired, and all our collection vehicles will now be inspected in relation to this issue. The glass spillage reported on the road has since been cleared.
Right, well, OK, good to get cleared up in more ways than one there. OK, let's move on to this. Freddie Mercury, apparently a very keen stamp collector.
Yes, something I didn't know, to be honest. This is in the Waltham Forest Guardian. And yes, the childhood stamp album of Freddie Mercury is going on display at the Postal Museum in London this summer. It's 54 pages of stamps, mostly from the British Commonwealth and from his upbringing in Zanzibar, as was Tanzania now. It's going on display as part of the museum's events to mark 50 years of Pride in the UK. Apparently his dad was a very keen stamp collector, and that passion was passed on to him, and he collected very specifically between the ages of 9 and 12, when I guess his interest was piqued elsewhere and he moved on from philately to pomp rock.
Absolutely. Well, this stamp collection, you know, it has been in the UK before, but it's also been all over the world, it seems.
Yeah, it has. It's been displayed around the UK, the Czech Republic, Australia, and has been on touring exhibitions. Georgina Tomlinson, who's curating this for the Postal Museum, says it's a surprising insight into the early life of a man who is remembered across the world for his incredible musical prowess and theatrical stage presence, less so for his stamp collection.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to see that, there we are, the Postal Museum. Finally, let's look at this fantastic story about a long overdue library book. Very long overdue.
Magnificently overdue. Yeah, I love this story. It's from the South London Press. It's the identity of somebody who returned the book to a library 48 years and 107 days after it's taken out has been revealed. This story was out a few weeks ago, where Tooting Library in Wandsworth put out a call on Twitter to find a person who's returned the book. It has been returned now by post. A Confederate General from Big Sur by Richard Brautigan. I have to say, I've not read it. Certainly wouldn't have been able to get it from Tooting Library, though. It was taken out in 1974, and it's now been posted back to them from Canada. And after the Twitter post, they found out that it was borrowed by Tony Spence, who's a retired judge now living in Port Moody in British Columbia. And the library's worked out that if it calculated on its usual daily basis, the total fine would be £6,170. But in Wandsworth, happily, they're capped at £8.50. So that's the maximum that this guy could have been fined for this. But on this occasion, they've waived the fine.
Absolutely wonderful from Tooting Library there to waive the fine. I mean, you would, wouldn't you?
I would suggest that if they've not got the money back by now, it's probably not worth chasing it up.
Absolutely. Well, Matt Withers, thank you so much for those roundup of the stories making headlines in the local papers in London. There we are. That was Matt Withers. Now, new research has shown that 3/4 of LGBT plus people in the UK have experienced anxiety. Almost a third say that they wouldn't be here without their pet, as it's shown that their animal friends significantly improve their mental health. Well, to talk more about this research, I spoke to the author of The Gay Guide, mental health campaigner and celebrity MasterChef winner Riyad Khalef a little earlier.
The research, which was done by Dreamies for the campaign Talk with Pride, is it's amazing to see in black and white figures what I knew was already the case, that 71% of LGBTQ plus people have a pet, 78% experience anxiety, 64% experience depression. And it's down to the fact that these people have been through so much to get to the point of coming out, and even at that stage they still experience discrimination within society at large. The research also showed that the LGBTQ plus community are the group of people in society that benefit most from pet ownership, which is incredible. That, you know, we all knew that having a dog or a cat in the house was a good thing, but now we've got this research behind it to show that actually it does really, really help. You know, the rates of self-harm, suicidal ideation in the community are far, far above the population at large. So we're always trying to find ways to bring that down.
Absolutely. And, you know, within the community, there's this notion of a chosen family. Do you think that the unconditional love from pets makes up part of that chosen family and is part of the reason why this community enjoys having pets so much?
Yeah, I mean, I think we as a community benefit from pets just as straight or cisgender people might, but there's the added layer of this little gorgeous animal, or very large gorgeous animal, doesn't have any judgment towards you. All they need is love, care, food, water. And the reward that you get from that is, it comes in spade loads. You know, we grow up in a world where we're constantly vigilant of who or what might be cause for attack, be it physical or verbal. And that could be in school, in the workplace, in your family, in your church, wherever it is. And so to have this life that's dependent on you, give you this unconditional love, it's a repairing and rewarding impact on your soul. You know, when I got my cat Claire, I thought this is just going to be a lovely little friend to have in the house who will help me with my loneliness when I'm working from home. Little did I know that I was going to have my own dark mental health episode that lasted months and months and months. Not only did I know she made that episode last for a shorter amount of time, but in my darkest moments, she could sense it. I don't know how, but she would jump onto me and cuddle me, and I could literally feel the anxiety being sucked out of my body. So I kind of put her up on a pedestal with the importance I put on my actual human therapist. They are just incredible.
Absolutely. And, you know, this research was quite significant. You mentioned a little bit about it already, but 3/4 of LGBTQ plus people in the UK have experienced anxiety. 2/3 have suffered from depression. That is a huge amount. It's a significant number. What do you think are the main reasons for poor mental health in the community?
I think there's a myriad of reasons why the community suffers with these two issues in particular, and many other issues that we haven't spoken about as well. And I think it's the fact that you grow up and your formative years are generally spent contorting, censoring and editing yourself in school or within your family home to try and conceal what a lot of us believe is a flaw or something sick or disgusting about ourselves. And then when you come out, you realize as an older person, the law of the land doesn't see me as an equal citizen. So that it compounds the feeling of being a second-class citizen, of being less than. And then, you know, there's homophobic abuse on the street. I mean, even myself, I've been called all sorts of names in the last few weeks, just walking through central London. And then as well, in the community, we have a hierarchy of usually white, gay men at the top, and then trans people of colour at the bottom. And because we've been through all of this bullying and trauma, when we come out the other side of it, we feel that we have a right to be just out for ourselves. And we forget that there are other members of our community that are struggling more than us. And so it's society-wide, it's community-wide, it's internal, it's external, it's so dynamic. And I think that the way that we'll change this is by having the help we need, access to therapy, maybe it's a PET, medication if we need it, and access to that, but also a real societal shift. And thankfully, I think in the last decade, I myself have seen that slowly but surely happen. It's just we've got to keep the pedal on the gas and keep it moving in that direction. And this research by Dreamies, I think, will help us get to that point quicker, because we can't just brush it under the carpet as something we've made up. We now know it's absolutely real.
There we are. That was Riyadh Khalifeh on mental health in the LGBT plus community. You're watching London Live News with Helena Wadia. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, we'll be speaking to the newly announced winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction. Don't go anywhere.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to London Live News. A reminder of our top story. The Transport Secretary has appealed directly to rail workers to avoid striking. During a speech at a train depot in North London, Grant Shapps said next week's rail strikes are designed to inflict damage at the worst possible time. Well, half of Britain's rail lines will be closed during strikes on 3 days next week by the RMT union, with disputes flaring over pay, jobs and conditions.
We have a rare opportunity here to fix the issues that have long since plagued our railways. But with strikes, all we're going to do is lose even more passengers, lose even more revenue, make further investment in railway uneconomical, and potentially lose thousands of railway jobs as well. Not only is there no justification for this action, it's going to cause misery. Misery to people looking forward to their first Glastonbury for 3 years. Misery to workers who can't get to their jobs. Misery to students who won't be able to get to their GCSEs and to their A-levels 17 public exams over this next week's strike period.
Well, that was Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, and in a previous statement, the RMT union said that due to the cost of living crisis, it is unacceptable for railway workers to either lose their jobs or face another year of a pay freeze when inflation is rising. Now then, the winner of this year's Women's Prize for Fiction was announced last night, and one of the UK's most prestigious book prizes was won by Ruth Ozeki. Now in its 27th year, the prize is awarded annually to a female author of any nationality for the best written novel in English, with accessibility, originality and excellence as its main criteria. Well, I spoke to the winner a little earlier, but first, here's a clip of the announcement. Just a warning, there are some flashing images on the way.
The winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction 2022 is The Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki.
It has not sunk in yet. I'm still just in a state of disbelief.
Oh, well, for those of us who haven't read the Book of Form and Emptiness, just tell us what it's about.
Sure. It's the story of a young boy, 12-year-old boy named Benny O, who, after the death of his father died in very kind of strange and strange circumstances. He starts to hear the voices of objects in his house speaking to him. And he doesn't quite understand what they're saying, but he understands the feeling behind it. And this is very disturbing. The voices start to follow him out of the house and to school, and he gets into trouble there. And eventually he finds his way to the large public library, where, of course, a library is a building filled with speaking objects, right? But at least, in the library, it's quiet. The books are on the shelves, and they're speaking in their quiet library voices. So he finds refuge there and meets a community of people who help him.
And what was your inspiration for writing the novel? Because some might say that's quite an unusual story.
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of voice hearing, and how, for example, as a novelist, of course, I hear the voices of my characters speaking to me, and that, in our culture, thank goodness, is something that is not looked at as a problem, right? It's looked at as a good thing, and I can use those voices. I can write stories, and people, approve of that. So that's on one side of the spectrum, and then on the other side of the spectrum are voices that that people hear, and that are very often diagnosed as being problematic in some sort of way, as being, mental health problems. And so I was very interested in the spectrum, and where along that spectrum we all fall. Because I think it's not as uncommon as people think to actually hear voices. I've had that experience myself.
Absolutely. And I think your novel, it deals with these big topics such as death and grief. And I think maybe we as a society are sometimes afraid to talk about those topics. Was it important to you to kind of tackle those big issues?
Well, I think, yes, it's very important to me. I'm a Zen Buddhist, right? And the first noble truth in Zen Buddhism is the truth of suffering, which is very simple. It sounds very pessimistic, but it's not. It's a fact. We all, at some point in our life, suffer, and that if we can look at that suffering, and if we can, stay with it and work with it rather than run away from it, it becomes much more workable. And so this is something that I suppose too. A lot of this book was really inspired by the death of my own father, the death of my own parents, and certainly that was where my interest in Zen came from. And I think Benny and his mom Annabelle, throughout the course of the book, are really learning to deal with the grief that follows in the wake of Benny's father's death.
Absolutely. Big topics that are very important to talk about. And why are prizes, just for women or just for minority voices important? And, would you have any advice for young women writers?
Oh, well, those are two great questions. I think prizes are important because, of course, they draw attention. They're occasions to celebrate. And so in this case, the Women's Prize for Fiction is an occasion to celebrate fiction written by women and to amplify these voices in some sort of way. When I was growing up, I was born in 1956, and there were not a lot of women, contemporary women writers, certainly not a lot of contemporary women writers of color at that time. And so I grew up really loving novels and wanting to be a fiction writer myself, and just not seeing people who looked like me, doing the kind of writing that I wanted to do. And so for me, it felt impossible, and it took me a long time. I published my first book when I was 40. I think I probably would have started a lot earlier had I been born now. And what I'm seeing now is, because of the support of, organizations like the Women's Prize, and certainly the Women's Prize Trust, which is has an educational mandate, there are so many more opportunities for women to write their stories. And I think those stories are absolutely essential for our well-being in the world these days.
Absolutely. Well, you know, this is your fourth novel, and your third novel, A Tale for the Time Being, well, that was shortlisted for the Man Booker Prize back in 2013. How does it feel now to have won one of the UK's most prestigious book prizes?
You know, it feels a little bit unbelievable to me. I mean, not more than a little bit unbelievable. It feels truly unbelievable. The shortlist this year was really strong, and all of the titles on the shortlist and all of the writers on both the shortlist and the long list were doing truly magnificent things with their writing. And so I feel like, in a way, there's a kind of random element to this. I feel very lucky, but at the same time, you know, I think this is really a time to celebrate, you know, not just one title, but all of the titles, you know, and to bring them all to people's attention.
There we are. That was Ruth Ozeki there, the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction. You're watching London Live News. Time for a final break now, but still to come. 12-foot giant trucks are making their way to the capital for the Monster Truck Entertainment Show in London for the first time. We'll be speaking to the drivers in the nail-biting event.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back to the final part of London Live News. Now, this weekend sees the tones of the African jazz pianist Frederick Gasita here in London. The Gabonese musician is bringing rhythms from not just his home country, but from all over the world to the Barbican Theatre this Sunday. Well, Frederick will be accompanied by his vibrant Bantu Jazz Orchestra, featuring over 70 artists. Well, Henry has been speaking to the man himself.
Do it in London, where I have been recording for 10 years with the London Symphony, orchestra, in my project. For me, it's like heaven. It's an accomplishment, and I'm very glad to do it in London, because I know the people from the Great Britain, especially they are very interested in culture in general, and the music I'm bringing, I know it's going to be very successful, because it's a combination of many things,
Let's talk about those bits of music then that you've just mentioned there, because you talk about culture and mix of culture. You're going to be bringing your style of jazz, but also Gabonese rhythms in the performance. Tell me a little bit about those.
When people ask me what kind of music you do, I love to say I'm a jazzman, because this is what I always loved, and I was from in classical music, like any young piano player, but this love of jazz, this love of music in general, made me think, maybe because of my origins, I should try, to do some mix, because my philosophy is that the music comes from all over the place, coming from classical, from jazz, coming from the Gabonese rhythm, which is very it's very powerful, it's very rich, and when you join it with the right harmony and the right melody, because melody is everything, everybody can remember melody, but not everybody can remember rhythm, but a complex rhythm, a complex African rhythm, if you put a wonderful melody, like a Mozart melody on a complex African rhythm, I believe that people is gonna relate to it. That's why I'm so passionate about this work, because it's a huge work and it's never gonna end. That's why.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you'll be accompanied by the Bantu Jazz Orchestra, featuring over 70 artists. So tell me about the group. When did you start working with the group?
First of all, it's my drummer and my bass player, because I've been playing with them for 25 years now, So this is where I integrated the Eben voice, which is a choir from Gabon, And they are wonderful, because they can do anything like American music, modern music, but they can also do African voices, like the Pygmies, or voices from South Africa, that kind of the counterpoint voices, they're very good at it. And when all of that is in the group, and I have some singer from Gabon, and one from Brazil also, when you join all those people together, it's going to be a explosion of good music,
There we are. If you're a jazz lover, Frederick is performing this Sunday at the Barbican. Now, 12-foot giant trucks are making their way to London for the Monster Truck Entertainment Show, which is coming to the capital for the first time. The adrenaline-charged competition will see drivers take on assault courses and battle it out in the nail-biting event. Well, Tanya has been speaking to one of the drivers for this year, Brianna Mahon, who is from the US and who is very much looking forward to bringing the event to London.
You know, I'm super excited. I've spent my entire career traveling the world and, bringing Monster Jam to countries for the very first time. We've made history in a lot of different places, and I'm super excited to be coming to London. It's a beautiful city. I'm driving a truck I've never driven before, Monster Mutt Dalmatian. So I'm just excited to come and, see how the fans react to Monster Jam for the first time. A full day of Monster Jam starts with the pit party, and that's where the fans get to come early. They get to do the meet and greet with us, take pictures, get autographs. They get to stand next to these 12-foot tall Monster Jam trucks and on the dirt at that. So they get to see everything up close and personal. Then after that, we start the competition. We have a two-wheel skills competition, which is any trick on two wheels and the best that you can do it. We have heads up racing, which is where, we're racing each other for that final racing championship. And then we've got freestyle, and that's what everyone's used to seeing, the crazy carnage, the flips, the backflips, the rollovers, the jumping, dozens of feet. And so it's organized chaos is what I like to call it.
It's visually absolutely incredible. There's so much going on, and as you say, like a 12 foot, 12 feet high? Is that,
Yes,
that's
12 foot tall and about 12 foot wide too.
Yeah, that's an incredible piece of machinery. I can imagine that you and the rest of the team are also under a certain amount of pressure. What kind of things, why is it that you have the safety team there? What kind of things can go wrong?
Any motorsport or any job or driving down the road in your car. I mean, things can break, you can roll over, anything can really happen. So without that safety team in place, we wouldn't be able to do these crazy stunts that we do. I mean, we have Monster Jam trucks jumping over 10 other Monster Jam trucks in stunts, doing double backflips, doing front flips. And, they're really an important part of the puzzle because they carry what we call an RII, which is a remote ignition interrupter that can shut off these massive trucks at any point in time. So if our throttle stucks or something on our truck breaks, they can turn off our Monster Jam truck in an instant and keep everyone safe, keep more parts from breaking. Just like what I'm wearing inside of the truck, I'm fully protected from head to toe in every amount of safety equipment you could even imagine. So it really eliminates the entire risk factor of what we're out there doing.
Yeah, I think the audience will also be happy to hear that when they're sort of sat there with zero control over what happens. How did you get into this? It's not the kind of thing when you do one of those tests at school and the careers advisor comes and says, oh, I think you'd be a lawyer or a gardener. I don't imagine that monster truck driver is one of those things.
I actually grew up in a motorsports family. I'm an only child, which is rare for a female to end up kind of so deep into this industry. But my parents grew up racing dirt bikes, four-wheelers, three-wheelers, mud trucks. And so they kind of got me into it at a really young age. I started riding dirt bikes, four-wheelers, snowmobiles at the age of 3. I'm barrel rolling them down a rock pile, getting up, doing it again. And I started racing motocross professionally in my late teens, early 20s. I had a pretty bad injury that added to my injury list, but ended up taking me out of motocross for good. So I just teach on the side, really teach kids how to get into the industry. After that, I started racing dirt track racing and sprint cars. And around that time is when Monster Jam kind of heard about me. And one of the veteran drivers had given me a call and asked if I'd be interested in trying out and seeing if I liked it. And honestly, it was a dream I never knew I had. It's not something that I strived to do throughout my life. Like a lot of these drivers grew up as fans of the sport. I was focused on dirt bikes. And so when this presented itself, I fell in love. And I mean, here we are 8 years later. I've accomplished so much. I've been Rookie of the Year. I finished 3rd at the Monster Jam World Finals. I've broken, glass ceilings for women all around the world, winning championships. I've designed my very own Monster Jam truck, created an entire brand, and driven a lot of iconic trucks over the years, just like Monster Mutt Dalmatian. And, you know, I couldn't have asked for a better life.
Yeah, absolutely incredible achievements there. Let's talk about, you know, being a woman in this kind of industry. Although the times might be changing, I think the perception or the reality is that it is mostly run by men. You know, is that changing?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a male-dominated world in the motorsports world. And so to come out here as a female, one of the few at that within the monster truck industry is such an honor. And just to be that positive, modest role model to show these girls that you can do anything you put your mind to. I mean, I've gone through so many male-dominated motorsports and came out on top and really just put my whole heart into it. And, you know, if that's what you love to do, go do it.
There we are, that's Monster Jam. That's on at the London Stadium this weekend, 18th of June. Let's take a final look at the weather now before we leave you. Tonight, we're still in the mid-20s, just dropping into the teens overnight before what's set to be a very hot start to the weekend. Tomorrow, it's expected to hit 30 degrees and maybe even beyond that, so don't forget your sun cream if you're out and about. On Saturday, it's a little cooler at 27 degrees, mostly cloudy, and on Sunday, there's a chance of a much-needed shower with the temperatures hitting around 20 degrees. Well, that's it from us tonight. Thank you for watching the show, and we'll be back with more news from across London at 6 p.m. tomorrow. See you then.